It's time for the Cupdate on Action Sports Jax 24/7.
This will be his fourth consecutive season with a victory in the NASCAR Cup Series. Christopher Bell off the final corner, and he wins in Phoenix.
A victory for Christopher Bell, who has year over year proven he is a contender. Just hasn't quite gotten that last step of the championship. Certainly something we will discuss on this week's edition of the Action Sports Jax Cup Date. Thank you so much for joining us for this one as we recap Phoenix, look ahead to Bristol. We got a chat with the NASCAR Cup Series driver in the middle of this thing. Whole lot of fun coming up over the course of this 30-minute program on the Action Sports Jax Cup Day. But let's go ahead and get it started, as we always do, by recapping the race that just went down. It was over in Phoenix, and well, it was 500-ish kilometers in Phoenix, as the race, of course, was the 500. There's 312 laps. It really confuses people because it's a 1-mile track. Anyhow, Christopher Bell goes out there, has a great performance, gets the victory, and really does what he should have done. He had the fast car. Heck, all the Toyotas were fast cars. All the Gibbs entries were fast cars, something we'll certainly get into. And one of the big things that this race does is it makes people look ahead, right? Because this race is in Phoenix, and guess what else is in Phoenix? The championship race, the Final Four, when you decide a champion at the end of the year. And that's a stage that Christopher Bell has been in the last 2 seasons. He hopes that maybe he picked up a little something from this edition that's going to help him come November.
I think we learned a lot, and so did everyone else, though. So, it seemed like the Toyotas had the advantage this week, and I'm sure that everybody else is going to go back to the drawing board and be a lot more competitive whenever we come back. While it makes me feel optimistic about where we're at for the championship race, there's still a lot of racing and a lot of development that's going to go on between now and then. So I don't think you can look too much into what happens today for November.
I think we focused on some very specific things with our setup with this package, and he was able to really tell us how he wanted to run this race and the line he wanted to run, and we optimized to it. So, I think that we just hit it better than everybody, and that made that gap to the field.
I mean, I say this a lot, and there, the rest is up to us to make it happen, but I feel like this is just the beginning. And making the Final Four and winning 1 or 2 races a year is that's not our end goal. Like, we don't want to be a 2-win, 1 or 2 win a year team. We want to be be a championship contender year after year, and multiple race wins year after year.
Adam Stevens said it. I mean, they hit it out of the park when it comes to the setup and what they wanted to do with this race, and that's why they were able to win by multiple seconds. It was a huge gap all the way back to second place in Chris Buescher, and that tells you a lot about the team run that Christopher Bell had. And you had that interesting point halfway through the race, or towards the end, where they had to kind of get flipped around. The field did, based on the way the cautions were falling, and it kind of made some of those guys have to charge from the back up to the front, which was interesting to see, and it certainly worked for Christopher Bell. Guys like Ryan Blaney had to come all the way back from about 20th. He battled his way back up to a 5th place finish, and you've got the 2 RFK drivers, Buescher and Keselowski. We'll get to them a little later on in the show. But hey, only Chevy in the entire top 10 of this one. Ross Chastain, he finishes 6th. Otherwise, it was all Fords and Toyotas, which is a little bit of a surprise, right? When you consider how much that Chevy had been dominating to start this season. They won the first 3 races, and here they only get 1 in the entire top 10. Tyler Reddick, Denny Hamlin, both of those guys, they led a lot of laps in this one. They wind up 10th and 11th in the final. Team Hendrick, they won 2 of the first 3 races, but not so good this week in Phoenix. Kyle Larson, your best of the 4, he finishes in 14th. And folks, it's over. The longest streak without a did not finish in the series comes to an end. That was surprisingly Corey LaJoie who held that streak. He had finished 44 races in a row, but caught up in a wreck and finishes 33rd at the Shriners Children's 500, not the Pennzoil 400. Ignore that. So let's talk about the race, shall we? And there was no shortage of passing, although a lot of people might consider this to be a not exciting race, maybe because the passes weren't coming at the front. But when you look at the stats, over 2,800 total passes in this race. That's the most ever for this new next-gen car at Phoenix, and that's by a wide margin, meaning there was a lot of passing going on in the back of the pack, the middle of the pack. Guys jockeying for position and working their way up through the field. Guys like Christopher Bell late in the race who had to work his way back up to get to the front. And while it was the Toyotas that were dominant, it was still an interesting race for Phoenix because, yeah, like we said, you look ahead to later on this year. Let's hear from some of the guys who didn't finish on top but still had decent runs there in Phoenix.
20 really probably had the best car, best driver all day, but 45 was right there, and then kind of us. So, unfortunately, just that restart I spun out, and that was it. Had to go to the back with 100 go, and that's all we had.
This was good to get everybody back together, prove that we're in this together, that we're gonna win and lose these things as a team. But that was almost a win today. We were close in a way, but like we were just talking, I couldn't even see the 20s. So, that was going to be a tough one to battle for a win. But really impressed with everybody today.
So those two drivers that you just heard from, Denny Hamlin, Chris Buescher, wouldn't be surprised to see them end up here in victory lane, as we call it, throughout the course of the season, as Christopher Bell joins up with William Byron, Kyle Larson, and Daniel Suarez as the 4 drivers in 4 different races to pick up the win. Still yet to have a multi-time winner. And here's where they come out in the point standings as you take a look. Ryan Blaney has been very consistent. That's now 3 top 5s in the first 4 races with, well, you know how Daytona goes. Daytona goes. Blaney first in the points, and that's really his style. Will he get to victory lane? One would think so, but he usually is very consistent towards the top 5. Kyle Larson's had a great season, though, as mentioned, only 14th in this race and not quite the results that they were hoping for there at Team Hendrick. Speaking of Team Hendrick, Elliott 9th, Bowman 13th. Those are the 2 guys that missed the postseason a year ago. More from Alex Bowman on our interview a little bit later on in the show. All right, let's talk about some of the big topics, the big talkers from this race, and we start with Toyota. Toyota was absolutely dominant. Take these stats into consideration. This is the first time ever that 5 different drivers from the same manufacturer have led at least 50 laps in a race. So it wasn't just one guy dominating, it was all the Toyotas. And all 4 of the Toyotas from Joe Gibbs Racing were amongst those with 50 laps led. Ty Gibbs, Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr. on that weird kind of shakeout when it came to when he was going to pit, when he wasn't going to pit, and of course your winner Christopher Bell, and then throw in Tyler Reddick in the 45, who had a really good car as well. But let's talk about Toyota, man. What a finish for them and what a race for them. You were wondering how long would it take to figure out the body style of this new car? Maybe they figured something out here in Phoenix. So, was this a championship preview? Take a look at this statistic brought to you by NASCAR. 75%, so since 2020, 75% of the championship 4 drivers finished in the top 10 in the spring Phoenix race. You are looking at the guys who finished in the top 10 in this one, and I just can't go along with it this year, simply because of the fact that you look at this group in the top 10, there's no Hendrick drivers. I'm pretty sure there will be 1, maybe 2 Hendrick drivers ending up within that championship 4 when we come to the end of the year. They're just too strong of a program to not be involved when it comes to the championship discussion. But you got your defending champ Ryan Blaney in there, and as mentioned, Christopher Bell has made it the last 2 years. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this does show you who 3 of the 4 championship 4 drivers are going to be. I don't know. We'll find out later on this year when we get to the postseason. One guy not in that picture, and really not in the picture at all, is Joey Logano. What is happening with Joey Logano? He gets another wreck. He's upset, of course, with his fellow drivers and causing him to wreck out of this race. But for Joey Logano, he is now 30th in the point standings, and that is a long way from here on the wall with the driver's standings that Joey Logano has a lot of ground to make up. It is very early. It's very early. We have 22 races until we get to the postseason, and guess what? Joey Logano is probably going to win one of those 22 races from now to the postseason. So it's a little bit of an overreaction, but Joey Logano, 30th in the points. Certainly something to keep an eye on. Let's take a look at some of the longest winless streaks. Now, this was entering the race at Phoenix. So go ahead and add 1 to all of these guys because all of these guys didn't win. Kind of surprising to see some of the names on here, right? Alex Bowman and Chase Elliott. We mentioned those two guys who didn't make the postseason a year ago from the folks over at Hendrick Motorsports. And then Brad Keselowski now at 102 races in a row. Of course, he had that big change over to RFK Racing. They've had to kind of figure out their footing, but he had a driver for RFK win 3 races last year. So you would expect Brad Keselowski to get it going and find a way to snap that streak. Justin Haley tops on that list. Of course, he had that victory at Daytona in the summer race thanks to a little rain. By the way, also on that list, Stenhouse and Cindric, both of them with their victories most recently in Daytona. All right, let's wrap up this first segment with a little talk about RFK Racing and Brad Keselowski. He ends up in 4th, his teammate Chris Buescher in 2nd. You see the quotes there from those two drivers. 2 drivers for RFK in the top 4. List them as my most impressive drivers of the race, simply because of the fact that, as mentioned, Keselowski's had to kind of build that thing up from when it was just Roush to now RFK Racing to get them back to being competitive in this new next-gen car, and he certainly has done that. So bravo to the folks over at RFK. 2 in the top 4 is a big accomplishment, so they are my most impressive driver, in this case 2 drivers, of the week. All right, guys, we are ready for our first break. When we come back, a chat with that man, Alex Bowman, the showman. That's coming up next right here on the Action Sports Jax Cupdate. When you think sports, you think Action Sports Jax, the official station of the Jaguars, on location for every game. But the most experienced team in town doesn't stop there. From high school football to the big events in the area, Action Sports Jax is always on. Now, we take that to a new level. Action Sports Jax 24/7 is around-the-clock coverage of the teams you love and the moments you can't miss. The best local sports in Jacksonville on Action Sports Jax 24/7.
You're watching the Cupdate on Action Sports Jax 24/7.
1-2 finish for Hendrick Motorsports. You can't script it any better than that, folks.
I mean, you probably could if you're the guy who finishes 2nd. Alex Bowman probably would have wanted it to be scripted a little differently. And by the way, there was some point of contention as to exactly how close it was at Daytona, because the race didn't end what you're seeing right there with the checkered flag. It ended when the caution flag flew, which would have been on the front stretch, on the tri-oval. And at some point, was it the point where Bowman had already passed his teammate, William Byron? Yeah. Just saying, just throwing that out there. Some folks in that camp probably thought that Bowman might have won the Daytona 500, but they used the exact timing to tell you it was Byron who did it. Let's learn a little bit more about Alex Bowman, shall we? The driver of the number 48 Ally Chevrolet for Hendrick Motorsports is 30 years old, but in terms of racing, he hasn't been in the Cup Series for quite as long as you maybe would expect. He got his big break back in 2016 as a fill-in driver for Dale Jr. in the 88 when Jr. had those bad concussions and right before he retired. So far, 7 career victories for the driver of the now number 48, then number 88, but he didn't make the playoffs a year ago. I chat with Alex Bowman about all things NASCAR Cup Series and their series looking ahead to the schedule in 2024. I'd say a lot has kind of changed over the last few years just with the way the schedule has been composed. Adding Atlanta as a quasi super speedway track, adding all these different road course races where you're now having to do a completely different style of racing a lot more often. It used to be forever just the 2 races on the schedule, but now they keep adding and adding to that part. How do you like the way the schedule has kind of evolved here over the last decade, really?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the biggest thing is NASCAR is continuing to change things and change it up and diversify the schedule. Obviously going to new venues, places we haven't been before. We raced on dirt for a couple of years, a lot of road courses. We go to a street course now. So it's cool to go to new places. I'm all for new racetracks. I think it should always kind of be fresh. And, we go to a lot of great racetracks, but at the same time, we've been going to everywhere for a long time, it seems like. So going to places that are new and kind of exciting and bring that little bit of excitement is really cool. So looking forward to, going back to Iowa this year, which is going to be really cool. And just kind of hitting some new venues and trying to continue to get better at the road course thing, because obviously we road course race a lot now. And the street course thing is kind of its own animal too. So excited about all that.
Yeah, new venues is certainly one way to kind of get the fan base energized, get some new eyeballs on the product, as is the recent Netflix Full Speed documentary. I'm sure you're going to get asked a lot about it, but I kind of want to know the driver's perspective on this thing. Have you watched all 5 episodes? Did you binge it at home like me and many other people I'm sure did? And what were your kind of thoughts on what that does for NASCAR and for the sport, just really elevating the product and getting it in front of some new viewers?
Yeah, I hate to say I haven't watched it. I feel like I'm too close to it. Like that's not something I could watch, but I did hear from some of my friends that William Byron really loves Fruit Loops. That was their takeaway from the Netflix show. So no, I think it's great. It's great for the sport, right? Like showing people's personalities. I think Denny's personality is really shown a lot in the show. So I think that's great. Like getting more eyeballs on the sport, kind of exposing it to new fans, and those strong personalities are really important for the sport. So I think it's all good. I just don't know that I can watch it. I feel like I'm too close, and I don't know, maybe I might, but I haven't yet.
Someone can get you a Cliff Notes version of it, right? I'm sure at this point you guys are kind of used to the cameras being around, right? I mean, you have their in-house media departments. You're constantly doing the interviews, no matter what track you're at. But was it a little weird maybe having some of them in like the big team meetings at Hendrick Motorsports last year after the milestone victory, for example? I mean, you're getting a lot different situations where there's cameras just absolutely everywhere at this point.
Yeah, for sure. I think we are used to cameras being around a lot, but not in competition meetings and not in stuff like that. So definitely a little bit different, but I think it's great for the fans to be able to kind of see what we do. I think, there's maybe not a ton of misconception, but a little bit that we're just hanging out during the week and not doing anything. And it's like a full-time 7-day-a-week thing. So, it's cool to be able to give some of that access. And, I wasn't a part of the show with everything I had going on with missing the playoffs and obviously kind of a bad year for us. But I think opening the door to Netflix and to fans like that is really important.
All right, still to come here on the Cupdate. It's time for a different drive. Monsters in the Mud. That was here in Jacksonville this past week. We'll hear from one of the drivers from Monster Jam. You got to use the voice when you say it. Monster Jam. Friday. Okay, that's coming up next right here on the Cupdate. When you think sports, you think Action Sports Jacks, the official station of the Jaguars, on location for every game. But the most experienced team in town doesn't stop there. From high school football to the big events in the area, Action Sports Jacks is always on. Now, we take that to a new level. Action Sports Jacks 24/7 is around-the-clock coverage of the teams you love and the moments you can't miss. The best local sports in Jacksonville on Action Sports Jacks 24/7.
You're watching the Cupdate on Action Sports Jacks 24/7.
Oh, we take a look at this week in NASCAR's Cup Series, and where are they headed? Well, they're headed to the short track. Oh, Bristol Motor Speedway inside the stadium. Love to see it. Xfinity Series, by the way, taking the week off. Remember, the last couple of years, this track was covered in dirt. Well, they're going back to the normal surface, normal racing, good racing. Truck's going to be Saturday night. That's going to be a lot of fun to see those guys wheeling it around Bristol. And then the Cup Series Sunday at 3:30. That, by the way, is a race that you can watch on Fox 30. Action News Jacks as they bring you the Food City 500 from Bristol Motor Speedway. Going to be pretty cool to see Bristol back to its original glory. All right, time now for a different drive. We mentioned the dirt on the track at Bristol. Well, we had some dirt on the field at the bank. Oh, this from this past weekend. It was a muddy affair as they had a ton of rain and storms, and it was a delayed start. But you know what? The folks who came out for Monster Jam just had an absolute blast there at the Monster Jam at Everbank Stadium. Good to see a great crowd that stuck through the weather. And it's a cool event for all ages, really cool. And I'm glad that a lot of folks here in Jacksonville stuck through the weather and had a chance to see some really good stuff with Monster Jam paying a visit to Jacksonville. Speaking of Monster Jam, one of the drivers had a chance to drop by the Action Sports Jacks 24/7 studios and catch up with Brent and Austin.
Lindsay, and in terms of like the stadium show, like do you prefer like the bigger stadiums, a little more space to move around, or do you want more of like the compact areas?
You know, I've always been in arenas. This is like one of my first stadium series. So arenas are fun because they're really technical and you can show off a lot of your skills, but stadiums, you go big. The crowds are bigger, they're louder, you get to do bigger backflips, and I'm all about that. So I really like doing stadiums so far this year.
We love talking to the Monster Jam drivers over the years because, I mean, the degree of difficulty of what you guys are doing now has changed so much. It's probably just old hat for you, but if you get a new fan that maybe took their kids 10 years ago and is going back this weekend, it's probably a bit of a different show, isn't it?
Oh, huge difference. I feel like every year we do this, we have new tricks coming out and new things that we're doing because we're constantly going back to school. So it's Monster Jam University. You can go back there and learn a new skill of, you know, the moonwalk or trying something new. Or if you have some crazy idea that you want to try, you go and do it. Then when somebody accomplishes it, they're like, hey, the rest of you, get back to school and figure this out because everybody else is good at it.
Well, now, Lindsay, when you go to the school, I mean, what's the insurance like? Because like I'm afraid I'm gonna like wreck a truck, like trying to do like you said, a moonwalk. If I roll that thing over, is that on you then to pay for the cost, or do they kind of cover everything?
Yeah, they cover it. So
nice.
They want you to go out there and try your hardest. And
have fun.
Rolling over is definitely, you have to do it to learn, for sure. And I always say, every time we make a mistake, our biggest mistake turns into the best trick that we can do. Like Monster Jam World Finals 2019, at the end of it, I told my husband, I was like, see that jump in the corner? I'm going to hit it as hard as I can. And I don't know what's going to happen, but it might be cool. And it ended up being this cartwheel save. And I won the World Finals because of it. So it was really awesome. It was kind of a mistake that turned into something great. And then I recreated it again when we did Superstar Challenge. So that was really neat. I mean, it's just one thing you do wrong, and then you just kind of have to perfect it to make it the best trick you can.
Good stuff there. By the way, you can catch the full interview online on our YouTube page, Action Sports Jacks. The Brent and Austin Show, weekdays from 10 to 1. Find it on any of the streaming services or the Action News Jacks Now app. Great place to watch it. Great show to have. And that's where you can watch the show as well. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Cupdate. Good stuff there in Phoenix a week ago. I know not everyone was excited about how dominant the Toyotas were. Well, let's see how it goes at Bristol this coming week. I know the fans that were in attendance there in Phoenix had a good time. We'll see some short track racing, even shorter than Phoenix, a little half mile. Oh, going to be a lot of fun. We'll talk to you next week on the Cupdate.
Thanks for watching the Cupdate on Action Sports Jacks 24/7.